Chapter 27 to 29. If I have to rate the most annoying things that I have to deal with, the media would easily take the top spot. Today is the day when the new hero rankings are announced. It's not an entirely stupid move, after all, with all the chaos that Stain created. What better way to pacify the population than to wave a shiny new thing in front of their faces? Of course, that's not considering the fact that I get to officially move up in the world. Before the event started, I got a letter from the Hero Commission saying that I reached number 9 in the ranks. A mind-boggling progression from what I was just a few months ago. Still, I can't help but feel that this action is meaningless. It's been a week since Izuku took down Stain. The currents of the underworld are already shifting, I can feel it in my very bones. Dark clouds are gathering, and with all for one on the loose, who knows what chaos may befell the world. Honestly, it's not even the slight uptick in villain activity that bothers me, no, it's the lack of coordinated villain activity that bothers me. So far, all the cases that we've linked to the proliferation of Stain's anarchist ideals have been isolated incidents. A few murder psychopaths and a couple of vigilantes, mostly middle school teenagers emboldened by that video that decided to take to the streets and clean up society's scum, most often than not by attacking popular heroes in their area. It wouldn't be so bad if said kids didn't have so-called villainous quirks. Honestly, this entire situation is slowly turning into one giant mess, just waiting for the spark needed to blow it all to hell and back. It's grating me that I can do nothing but stand back and watch it all burn. After all, what could I even do? To the public, I am the darling child. The one that oh so selflessly threw away a lifetime of comfort and security to protect the people. All it took was one photo leak of me asleep at my desk over a mountain of paperwork with a conveniently placed clock in the background. The photo was also made in such a way that it was of low quality so that no one would question if the event was staged or not. Gran Torino was right. I can't go on faking this facade of the perfect golden child. I've got too much blood on my hands to be one, but then again, I'm not the hero these people deserve, I'm the one they need. Honestly, this entire situation annoys me. The civilians are entirely dependent on the heroes. That is not a healthy way to form a society, and honestly, if I didn't know better, I'd say that they are trying with all their might to revert to a caste system with heroes at the top, villains and vigilantes at the middle, and the civilians at the bottom. Enough griping, time to get back to work. All for One is planning something. A few of his old friends that managed to survive his fall relatively intact have all taken a short vacation, all at the same time and only for a day. This is no way a coincidence. // For Izuku, school was shit. From the moment he stepped foot in the class, everyone surrounded him and began bombarding him with questions. They were all saying how cool and strong he was that he was able to defeat such a villain by himself. Izuku knew the answer to that. He didn't take down Stain by himself, not truly. His ideology was still chewing at him from the inside, and the heart-to-heart with his brother didn't help matters. In fact, it made them worse. Honestly, it was so much easier when he was little. Back then, the heroes were always the good guys, and the villains were the bad guys. Thankfully, Aizawa entered the class soon enough. "Good morning, class," said their bored teacher. "Good morning, Mr. Aizawa," replied the mindless sheep. Class. "You're all here, I see. I trust that your internships were enlightening?" asked Aizawa. A lot of heads nodded, though a few remained still. "Good. Now, as you know, the final exams are coming up, so don't slack off. You'll have a practical portion as well as a theoretical one. Furthermore, those who fail don't get to go to the summer training camp in the woods," said Aizawa. The class erupted in excited cheers that were quickly silenced by Aizawa flashing his quirk-given red eyes. "Now, on to other matters," Midoriya called out Aizawa. "Why yes, Mr. Aizawa," answered back Izuku. "Due to your stunt with the hero killer, the principal has decided that you should take the provisional license exam that is the closest. That means that you are to take the exam the very next day after your final exam," said Aizawa. Izuku cringed. He was being singled out, again, and honestly, he didn't know if this was meant to be a punishment or a reward. Somehow, he could see Aizawa making it both. Anyways, that is all for today. // Help. Get over here, we have to use our quirks together, otherwise we can't stop him. Oh, God, he's Herga. Static filled the radio frequencies, and the villains were quiet. Their last line of escape was cut off, and Rikudou was out on the hunt. It was at this point that the leader of the band of villains wondered why he even bothered to rob a bank in this city. After all, it was infamous for being the personal stomping ground of the new number 9 pro hero, Rikudou. Rikudou was a new name in the fight between heroes and villains, but he quickly made his reputation known. There were rumors all thought the underground, rumors of hideouts going dark and being found utterly destroyed, of high-level brokers captured and their entire networks and associates being destroyed. In all these events, the ones that reached the public at least, Rikudou was the one credited for the action. He had heard from the elders among the villains, retired folk whose glory days had long since gone, that it was the same when All Might rose to power, only back then there was the so-called symbol of evil to oppose him. Now, no one stood against Rikudou's relentless onslaught. All in all, it was difficult to see him as the 15-year-old kid he was. Heck, even to most civilians, Rikudou was an adult, not a teenager, or so were their opinions of him. A harsh knock was heard from the door. The two villains looked at each other and prepared themselves for their last stand. The door was blasted inward and from the smoke came a length of chain that wrapped up the lead villain. His companion squeaked and he too was struck by a gigantic war fan, knocking him unconscious. From the door, came forth Rikudou looking pissed and half-dressed, considering that he was topless. "You know what I really despise about you, villain?" asked Rikudou as he pulled back on the chain, dragging the terrified man to him. The man shook his head. "It's the fact that you always choose the most god-awful hours to pull this kind of shit. Do you have any idea on the amount of paperwork I need to fill out after I catch you mongrels? Do you?" yelled Rikudou in the thug's face. The thug was shaking and pissing himself. A normal reaction when faced with a pissed-off man who was more than capable of ripping out someone's spine with his bare hand. Seeing what had happened, Rikudou wrinkled his nose and locked his eyes with the thug. The Sharinagan spun and all the man's secrets were left bare for him to see. Shortly afterwards, the man dropped unconscious and Rikudou scowled. Another low level without any useful information. // Finally, the day of the practical exam arrived and Izuku was exhausted. He'd had to train twice as hard since not only will he be facing off against whatever the teachers decide to throw at them, but he'd also soon be up against some of the most experienced hero course students from multiple schools and it seemed like that, like his brother before him he was doing it alone, he was doing this all alone. "Okay, now that you're all here, let's start this test. For today you will be paired off against a teacher. Your goal is to either ensure that one of you escapes through the designated door or you capture a teacher," said Aizawa. "Any questions?" "No?" "Good," he said without giving the students any time to ask their questions. Then came the team assignments and Izuku's heart dropped. Of course, he'd be paired with Kaken of all people. And that's not all, he was supposed to either evade or capture freaking All Might. The second part wasn't as daunting as it may appear at first sight. After all, the teachers were given a mobility handicap and although All Might was a great hero, he wasn't unbeatable. Madara had proven that last year when he won against All Might all on his lonesome. And therein lied the problem for Izuku. Even now Katsuki was scowling, more than likely at the perceived slight the teachers had made against him when they dared suggest that he should work with Izuku of all people. It was sad, but Izuku knew that Katsuki had no chance to stand where he stood now. It wasn't a matter of willpower or determination, it was a simple fact that Izuku was better trained and better prepared to face such a situation than Katsuki, and he doubted that Katsuki would ever accept a hand offered in help. So this left him at an impasse. He could go ahead and plan for Katsuki's reckless charge, but he had the feeling that he should at least try to bring him on board before he discarded him altogether. Unfortunately, Katsuki was gone by the time Izuku made up his mind to speak with him. It was so, that with a long-suffering sigh, Izuku retreated to the camera control room to get a sneak peek at the others' battles and maybe plan a contingency or two. Thank God that he was allowed the full use of his equipment, otherwise he would have really been screwed. // Team Bakugo and Midoriya vs All Might, start. The announcement was followed by a loud horn and the countdown timer beginning to tick down. Without even waiting a second, Katsuki took off. "Wait! Kaken, please work with me, we're up against All Might for God's sake. You can't just waltz in and expect to beat him," said Izuku. "Oh yeah? Well, watch me, you damned nerd. I'll win an indisputable victory, here and now, and I'll show everyone that I'm the best," yelled Katsuki, not even breaking his stride. On the inside, Izuku was screaming. "Could you stop, for once in your life, from being such a jackass? You can't do this alone." Whatever Izuku was going to say was cut off by a backhand from Katsuki. It didn't knock Izuku down, but it was more than enough to send him a few steps back and make his nose bleed. "Now, you listen here, you damned nerd," began Katsuki slowly as he looked at Izuku. "I've had enough half-assessed victories. This is not going to be one of them. I'll get an indisputable win, no matter what." Izuku didn't reply as he was too busy trying to make sense of what just happened. It was only the pressure wave of air that brought him out of his reverie long enough to bring out a shield so he didn't get blown off. Unfortunately, Katsuki wasn't so lucky and was blown off without much of a problem, though he did manage to land relatively close by. Damn it. I ran out of time, thought Izuku. Looking around, he could see the devastation that All Might brought. This is going to be a pain. Kaken, you okay? Asked Izuku. Ugh, course I am, you damned nerd. Now where's All Might? I'll beat him up good. Huh, you think you can defeat me so easily? Heroes, came All Might's voice from the smoke. Looking up at his favorite hero, Izuku couldn't help but compare him to his own brother. Was it strange that he found All Might to be lacking the same presence that Madara usually boasted? Katsuki's mind, though, was focused on other matters as he charged straight at All Might, hoping to blind him with a new move called the stun grenade. Izuku took this opportunity to unseal the gunbai he took from his brother's armory and approach All Might stealthily. All Might took notice of this, but was unable to do anything but widen his eyes as he was smacked away by the giant war fan into one of the nearby buildings. With two signs from his left hand, Izuku slammed his hand on the ground. Fuinjutsu Earth Style, Boulder Dome. Two half-boulders rose from either side of the place where All Might fell and smashed together in an attempt to squash All Might. Knowing that this wouldn't hold up for long, Izuku picked up Katsuki by the back of his shirt and pulled him into a back alley, just in time to escape All Might's sight. Phew, we're safe now. Can we please talk strategy, Kaken? We can't afford to make too many mistakes, especially not against All Might, said Izuku. Katsuki didn't answer, and was instead looking down at his hands with a hooded gaze. Kaken? Asked Izuku. I'll beat him. You hear that, you nerd? I'll beat him, and while he's occupied with me you run like the little bitch you are, said Katsuki. Right, like that worked out so well last time you attempted it. Come on, even a child could see that you don't stand a chance in hell of even being a pebble in All Might's path, said Izuku with more than a little bite in his tone. Katsuki flinched and looked up at Izuku with hate. Izuku didn't care, though. Can you lure him out in the open? I should be able to restrain him just enough for us to make our escape, said Izuku. Before Katsuki could reply, Izuku was gone, having flash-stepped to a nearby roof to prepare the tags he would need to craft a barrier of sufficient strength to keep All Might inside. Back in the alleyway, Katsuki was seething. In his mind, even now, Izuku was looking down on him, so he'd show the nerd and bring down All Might by himself. Getting to his feet, Katsuki went in search of All Might. From the rooftops, Izuku was following the progress of his so-called teammate. It was obvious that he wouldn't work with him, so that left Izuku with only one other option, to use Katsuki as a stepping stone, no matter how disgraceful it felt. He was waiting for Katsuki to engage All Might so that his barrier could be set. It was a devious one, this barrier, because it prevented the ones trapped inside from using their quirks. Now, this would be a problem for All Might and his secret, but Madara had constructed a seal specially designed for All Might jets for such an occasion. Looking down, Izuku saw Katsuki firing his gauntlets at All Might. The smoke was enough for Izuku to launch his kunai with the sealing tags and activate the barrier. Fuinjutsu, for Wind Prison. From each tag lines of chakra coalesced and formed an even bigger ring around All Might and Katsuki. Without their power, they were easy prey for the chakra chains that bound them, and Izuku easily body flickered out of the arena. All in all, it was a good fight, even if it left a very sour taste in Izuku's mouth. Summer came quickly after the Holstein debacle. After my ascension into the top 10, I suddenly found myself working for longer and longer hours and lacking any time to train myself. Luckily, the fact that I knew the Shadow Clone Jutsu helped me immensely. Honestly, if I didn't know better, I'd say that this jutsu was specifically created to ease one's administrative burdens. At any rate, it is a useful took in my kit. The only downside to it is the clone's fragility, something that I still haven't found a way to remedy. Still, I can't complain too much, after all it did allow me enough time to learn would release. I haven't done much with it except for being able to make trees grow taller, but with enough time, I'm sure that I'll reach the level of proficiency that Yamato was able to achieve in the Narutoverse at the very least. After that, well, you know the saying, Hashirama's the limit. Izuku's been growing well these past few months. When I saw the recording of his provisional license exam, I was impressed. It seems that Izuku truly is lightning-natured, and he even managed to get a bootleg version of the Chidori to work for him. Highly impressive, considering that it took me the better part of a year training with it on and off in order to get that kind of proficiency. Slowly, but surely, it seems that Izuku is working his way up to the lightning chakra armor of the Rikuds. I mean, I'm barely proficient in the technique and it's doing wonders for me both in terms of defense and offense, and that's besides the absolute miracle it does in terms of mobility. If Izuku manages to get to the level of the legendary third Rikudu, One for all powered Sage mode is already making a monster out of him, adding the ultimate shield and spear of the lighting chakra armor on top of that is more than a bit of overkill in my opinion. And that's before we even take into account his Uzumaki-like proficiency with seals. Speaking of seals, we've recently had resistance seals placed on us. It was becoming difficult for Izuku and me to get any sort of meaningful workout done that doesn't involve beating the ever-loving shit out of each other. That's another area that Izuku's been excelling recently. I don't know if it's because he can use more nature energy or what, but he seems to have developed some sort of battle precognition. True, it's nowhere near the Sharingan's battle precognition, even when I had just unlocked it, but it's there and it's enough to give Izuku an edge in combat. Where before he was guaranteed to lose against me no matter what, nowadays it can really go either way in a pure taijutsu match, if I don't use any chakra at all that is. His chakra capacity is increasing almost exponentially. Right now, he's at what I could only consider to be low to mid jonin. This increase came with an increase in his capacity to utilize the wellspring of power that is one for all to near 20% continuously. Luckily enough, Izuku isn't turning into a muscle head, which is a good thing. The absolute last thing this world needs right now is All Might version 2 and yes, I'm looking at Unitai when I say this. Over the past 4 months Izuku has made incredible advancements in the field of Fuinjutsu. He managed to take Fuinjutsu to a level I could have never imagined. Jutsu, barriers, traps and even restraints, all made possible by Izuku's work in the field. I couldn't be prouder, and while it's true that he's shit at ninjutsu, that doesn't really matter when you can move faster than most humans can react and punch with enough strength to collapse a decent-sized building. As I sit here and look over what we've accomplished so far, I can't help but feel a modicum of pity for the rest of humanity. Very few will ever get to experience the feel of chakra rushing through your body or the blood-pumping thrill of battle at the kind of level that Izuku and I are at. The use and study of chakra will go on, that is not an issue. Even if Izuku and I fall before we can pass on our knowledge, chakra will be rediscovered someday far in the future. This being said, I can't but imagine what a future community of chakra wielders would be like and how will the world at large take to our existence. I can't imagine the world governments being happy that such powerful people exist in the world. I should begin planning, just in case it ever comes to light that I'm actually quirkless. // It was a hot summer day when Izuku got the notice that he was leaving for the summer training camp. I watched him go without much interest, after all I too would join him later on at the camp. Seeing as Yue has become a target for villains, Nizu has asked me to accompany the student on their trip, well half of it. Honestly, it's more of a cover so that I can train in peace for at least a week. Heck, even the state-of-the-art lab I installed in my hideout has done nothing but collect dust for the past 4 months. I'm still worried, though. Sending the entire first-year hero course students out into the woods, far away from any town and any kind of support in case of an attack is reckless. Sure, there will be 6 pro heroes with them, 7 if you count me, but I won't be there all the time. Being the number 9 pro hero is not easy work, despite what the tabloids might say. I can understand the reasoning behind this move. With the random nature of this camp, it will be harder for villains to track the students to their training site. It would have been an excellent strategy if not for the small fact that our enemy is a 200-year-old quirk-stealing sociopath who's definitely not going to fall for this trick. And let's not forget that he has his own professional spy network. One so good that I'll bet my sword that Nizu is searching high and low for any potential traitor among UA staff and students. I set down my cup of coffee and go to get dressed. I'm not taking any weapons or armor with me today, just a change of clothes and my workout clothes and whatever toileting necessities I might need. It's very convenient to carry everything with me nowadays since Izuku managed to crack the code for the storage seal. After I finish packing the clothes storage seal and roll it back up, I shove it in my pants pocket. On my way out, I pick up a meter-long and relatively thick roll of paper. This is the battle scroll, as Izuku constantly insists on calling it. Because I'm not as proficient or knowledgeable with seals as Izuku, I can't pull off complex seals from memory and simply slap them down with chakra engraving. No, I have to use the tried and true method of unfurling the seal and slapping it down on the thing I want to use it on, or not. It all depends on the situation, and only then can I actually activate the seal. Take for example Rho AIAs. I have to use the 7 talismans and throw them in the air before I can activate the main seal, which is one of the few that I know by heart. Izuku doesn't need to do that, he can just whip up the seal in midair in its completed form. Now yes, technically I could use the Sharingan to simply memorize the seal and regurgitate it as many times as necessary, but I'm sorry to tell you that Fuinjutsu doesn't work like that. You have to be perfectly aware of how each strand of chakra interacts with the rest, and that can only be achieved with practice. A lot of practice, the kind that I didn't have time to do since I came onto the stage as a pro hero. Moving on, I left the house, scroll safely tucked in a hard plastic cover across my back. With that, I took off running up the nearest building and across the rooftops. Normally I would just fly or run normally wherever I would want to go, but I felt like I had to stretch my legs today. An hour later I arrived in the parking lot where the summer training camp will begin. As I jump over the highway, I see a black car already parked there. From the car, 3 people come out. Mandalay, Pixie Bob, good to see you, I called out. The 2 seemed surprised to see me. Rikudou, how did you manage to get here so fast, asked Mandalay. I ran, I said blankly. They looked unsure and confused. I turned my attention to the small child of the group. And who's this? I asked with a quirked eyebrow. Oh, that's my nephew, Kota. Kota, this is Rikudou, he's the number 9 pro hero, said Mandalay. The kid scoffed and looked away. Okay, that's the first time that has happened. I look at Mandalay, who looks at the scene with sorrow but does not seem surprised by it. Strange, though this is not my priority right now. Is everything set? I ask. Yes, of course, everything's set, said Mandalay. We're ready to rumble, said Pixie Bob with a cheer. Good. Just so you know, I'll have my brother skip this so-called initiation, I said. This surprised them. Not that we're completely opposed, but why, asked Mandalay. I looked out at the beautiful scenic valley and pointed to it. Do you want all that to go up in flames? I asked. This seemed to shock the 2 heroes. What? Surely he's not that powerful, not even Endeavor can do that much damage, said Pixie Bob. Well, normally he wouldn't, but I checked my armory before I left and there were more than enough incendiary grenades missing to burn twice that amount of forest, and that's before I go into his personal offensive toolkit. Suffice it to say, the test will be too easy if you throw Izuku into the mix, I said. The 2 heroines looked at each other, somewhat worriedly. It's just my luck that in that exact moment, the bus with Class 1A arrived. All the kids came out of the bus and into the parking lot. They seemed somewhat confused as to why they were here. Nissan, what are you doing here? Asked Izuku as he noticed me. This drew the attention of several of his classmates. From the looks on their faces, I could tell that they were surprised to see me here. I'll be joining you at the training camp, mostly to act as added security. Now gather round so that I can explain what's going to happen next, I said. It took a while, but the kids all shuffled into a loose half-circle around us. I sent a small nod at Aizawa and he nodded back. I could see him skulking back to the bus. Clapping, I drew the attention of the students. Now that everyone's here, we can begin the summer training camp, I said. The Ida Scion put his hand up. Excuse me, sir, but this is a parking lot, what are we supposed to do here? He asked. Oh, that's simple, but I'll let Mandalay explain more. For now, Izuku, come here for a bit, I said. Izuku stepped up somewhat unsure. I was after all still smiling, and he knew that wasn't a good thing. I put my hand out. The incendiary grenades you took from the armory, I said. Izuku went red at being caught red-handed like that. A gasp was heard from his classmates along with surprised cries of Midoriya. It took a bit of fidgeting from Izuku and a flash of the Sharingan from me, but I managed to get him to cough up a small mound of paper bombs, kunai and a few scrolls filled with a few hundred grenades. Looking back, I could see that his classmates were clearly shocked. I turned to address them. Now, don't be discouraged. Izuku had a good idea when he decided to stock up on weapons before he left his house, but the sad reality is that you won't be allowed to carry a small arsenal of weapons on your person at all times, nor will you be able to do so. This training camp was made to test your limits, and so without further interruption, I hand you off to Mandalay. Except Izuku, that is, I said. Wait, that's not fair. Why does he get special treatment? Protested the kid with purple balls for hair. I looked at him. Don't think this is anything easy. Izuku is simply on another level than the rest of you. It would be unfair to limit him by making him slow down for you, I said. Izuku cringed at the tone I used and Bakugo chose that moment to explode. Are you looking down on us, you fucker? Yelled Bakugo. Watch your tone with me, you mongrel. Don't think that I won't embed your skull 6 feet in the ground simply because you're a student, I said in a cold tone as I flashed my Sharingan. The killing intent that was leaking off me made the people present take a step back. Except Izuku, that is. Nissan, enough, said Izuku as he released his own chakra presence to combat mine. I said nothing as I reined in my power. Sorry about that, Mandalay, if you will. This seemed to snap her out of her daze. Oh, right. The training camp is at the base of that mountain. Your job is to reach it before lunch, so in about 3 hours at the earliest. Since this is private property, you can use your quirks. The students looked at one another. I have a bad feeling about this one, guys, said Kaminari. Yeah, me too, said Kirishima. The class began to slowly back away and towards the bus. Izuku came to my side and gave them a pitying look. I began folding hand seals and slapped my palm on the ground. Earth style, mobile earth, I said. The ground on which the students were standing moved and flipped them off the cliff and into the forest below. From here on out it was Pixie Bob's turn. I turned to see Izuku looking at me expectantly. So, what now? He asked. Now we head to camp. It's been a while since we sparred and I need to check our progress with the resistance seals. Afterwards, we'll train your lightning chakra, I said. He nodded and vanished in a body flicker. I turned to the other pro heroes. I'll meet you at the camp, I said, and followed with my own body flicker. The remaining heroes looked at the space where Madara had just been. Mandalay turned to Aizawa, but he cut her off before she could ask anything. Don't bother trying to understand them. I trust the problem children enough to know that they won't slack off. It's for the best that they train separately anyways, said Aizawa. Mandalay shut her mouth and nodded. She had known that Rikudou and his brother were special cases. Nizu had told her so from the beginning, but only now did she truly understand what he meant. // Returning to normal speeds, I took a seat at the bench where Izuku was waiting for me. So, Nai-san, what are we going to do? He asked me. I restrained a cringe myself. He was glaring at me. I should have expected this, honestly. Izuku is a sucker for fairness and hates being the one apart. A remnant from his shitty childhood. Well, first we're going to go over some jutsu that I have in mind for you. I noticed that besides your fists and that thing you do when you try to coalesce lightning chakra into something akin to my Chidori, you have no offensive tools if you are ever in a position that makes you unable to use Fuinjutsu, I said. Izuku grimaced. He knew this weakness of his then. So what are you going to teach me, Nai-san? He asked somewhat excitedly. I grinned at him and put out my hand. In my palm a Rinnegan whirled to life. Izuku's eyes went wide at the jutsu and grinned back. I let the Rinnegan dissipate. But first, let's have a spar. It's been a while since we went full force against each other, I said. By this point Izuku's grin turned bloodthirsty as his eyes shone green with power. Ah, there it was, the battle maniac that Izuku had suppressed inside for almost 10 years. I too took a combat stance and at an unseen signal we exploded into motion. // The rest of Class 1A trudged through the forest defeating beast after beast, but it was not easy going. They were beginning to lose steam and with their objectively biggest powerhouse gone, the pressure on Katsuki and Shoto to perform was that much greater. You know, I hate to be that guy, but we could have really used Midoriya's help right about now, said Zero. I know what you mean, man. These things would be weak to physical attacks from Midoriya, said Kaminari. The rest of the class didn't voice their opinion, but it was quite clear to see where they stood. Normally this exercise wouldn't be difficult, but then again they normally had Izuku on their side. For the first time in their lives some of the students began to wonder if this is how hero society would be like if All Might was no longer around. With top heroes scrambling to hold back the tide of villains with ever-increasing power. It took them several good hours, but they eventually managed to get to camp. Unsurprisingly they found Aizawa waiting for them along with the other heroes they encountered at the bus stop. The surprising fact was that the Midoriya brothers were nowhere to be found. Sensei, where is Midoriya? Asked Ida. Just as he was about to answer, an explosion rocked the clearing. Aizawa gave a defeated sigh as Mandalay of the Pussycats looked at the location of the explosion with worry. Don't worry, they're just winding down now, said Aizawa. Just then, a streak of green shot out from the trees and into a larger clearing near the camp. A second, brighter streak of blue followed. The two streaks clashed ever so often with each other, making the ground where it happened buckle and crater under the tremendous pressure they were exerting. That doesn't look like they're winding down, said Kirishima. You weren't here a few hours ago. At least they're not throwing lightning at each other anymore, said Aizawa in a depressed tone. Wait, throw lightning? Wasn't it fire that he was throwing in the sports festival? Asked Kaminari. As if to spite them, Madara returned to a normal speed as he sped through some hand seals. Seemingly catching Izuku off guard, Madara managed to connect a stream of lightning with Izuku, only for the latter to seemingly block the lightning with his own green one and redirect the stream of blue lightning at a nearby tree, setting it on fire. Seeing this, Madara spat out a water ball at the tree as he dodged Izuku's counterattack. As soon as the motion was over, the two once again vanished in streaks of blue and green. The class looked over dumbly at the spot where the short exchange had taken place. "What the fuck?" asked Katsuki, seemingly voicing everyone's thoughts. "Okay, that's enough gawking. Get cleaned up and take your bags from the bus. Tonight, we're cooking dinner, but that won't happen again," said Aizawa. That seemed to spurn the others into motion. An hour later, they were all cleaned up and hungry as all hell. It just so happened that right then, a thoroughly exhausted Izuku came out of the forest being half carried by his brother. "Midoriya," came the cry of some of the class. "Oh, hey guys," came back an overly cheery response. That seemed to take some of the students by surprise for a bit. It was easy to see why, considering that he was missing most of his clothes and he had cuts and bruises on his exposed skin as well as several burns. That being said, Madara was far from being in pristine condition himself. His t-shirt was dirty, and he had more than a few marks denoting that someone had used his face to break rock. Though in the end, it was obvious that Madara came out on top. "Come on, you little battle maniac. You dragged this fight on long enough. Let's get some food in your stomach and put you to sleep," said Madara as he dragged Izuku after him. // After I made Izuku eat something, whatever force was keeping him awake seemingly failed as he passed out. I sighed and picked him up and tucked him in one of the spare sleeping bags in the boys' room. After that, I headed out to where dinner was served. After all, that fight may not have been a drain on my chakra, but it sure as hell was one on my stamina, and I was hungry. I didn't expect Izuku to put up that much of a fight, to be honest. Going for nearly 7 hours non-stop is quite something. If I didn't have chakra to sustain me, I would have probably died of exhaustion. What truly surprised me was the near exponential power increase as he reached a stable 20% one for all. As he was right now, he was creating bursts of air pressure with each punch. I can't help but wonder what his power would be like when he manages to reach stable 100%. "Oi, Midoriya-san over here." The call from the students snapped me out of my musing. I probably shouldn't, but I will indulge myself for this night. After all, it would not do for the famed Rikudou to be seen mingling with lowly mongrels. As I approached, I could see that most of the class had gathered around a campfire alongside a good portion of Class B. "What are you still doing out? You do realize that tomorrow's training will not be easy," I said. "Yeah, but we're toasting marshmallows on a campfire," said the pink one, Ashido I believe her name was. The irony in that statement was that only she was toasting marshmallows on a stick. "Hey, I know, how about we tell stories?" "Midoriya-san, will you join us?" asked Kaminari. I took a seat in a spot that was most surely left open for Izuku. "Call me Madara. It'll be less confusing this way," I said. It felt nice to unwind like this. "You know, you're not really how I expected you to be," Ribbit said Azui, the frog quirk girl. I raised an eyebrow at that comment. "Yeah, I mean, you were such a badass at USJ and the entire media knows just how dedicated you are to your job, and I just didn't expect you to be so laid back and honest. Especially since Aizawa-sensei said that he didn't really think you were a hero," said Kirishima. The group was silent as I mulled over what I had heard. Even those few from Class B were listening attentively. I sighed. Aizawa is correct. I may not be the money-grabbing type, but I'm not a hero. You see, by my definition, a hero is someone that achieves great deeds and becomes immortalized in legend that will persist far beyond his own life. In today's world, a hero is someone who selflessly gives their all for the benefit of others, someone that goes to incredible lengths to save just one more person. I am not that type of person. My choice to become a hero is solely a pragmatic one. Being a hero is a sure way to gain prestige quickly, and the license is useful if I ever need to defend myself," I said. They were silent after my admission. Now, I don't normally go around spitting out my life story to every new person I meet, but just like when I told Benizu and the others about Chakra at the beginning of my stay at UA, my tale now has another purpose. "But then, how did you get to be All Might's successor?" asked a thoroughly confused Kendo. I chuckled. "Who said I was his successor?" "I certainly didn't," I said. But the press conference began Momo, but I cut her off. "I was announced as his heir, that is true, but heir doesn't mean successor. I may have taken up his role as head of Might Tower, but I am not the true heir to his ideals and conviction. His did not pass on to me his will. I am merely a placeholder until the true heir is ready," I said. They were silent as they digested what they earned. The idea that out there is another that will one day be the successor to All Might and myself was quite something. "It's Izuku, isn't it?" All the students gave their full attention to Shoto as he looked at me with narrowed eyes. "He's All Might's true successor, isn't he?" said Shoto. I looked him straight in the eyes. "He is," I acknowledged. "Then why did you take his spot?" asked Uraraka, fists clenched in righteous fury. "Bold of you to assume that I even want this spot." This got a reaction out of her. "Tell me, do you know how much time All Might has left as a hero? A year? Less? I'll tell you. Right now, he can only use his quirk for at most 1.5 hours a day, and he spends most of that time using it to keep up the form you're all accustomed to in order to try and pass on whatever he can to the next generation before he inevitably dies. This condition is a result of a battle he fought some 6 years ago," I said. This sent a wave of shock through the students. "Who could wound All Might like that?" asked Shoto. I closed my eyes as I gathered my thoughts. This is a story I do not share lightly. By the mere fact that I told you about All Might's reduced state means that I have broken that man's trust. You will keep whatever you learn here to yourselves. What I will tell you will more than likely frighten you, and if come tomorrow you wish to leave the hero course, I will not hold it against you. I'm telling you this because as UA students and more importantly as classmates and friends of the true successor to the symbol of peace, you will inevitably be targeted by villains belonging to the organization of All Might's arch-nemesis such as the League of Villains. I'm not going to baby you. Whatever childhood you may have left ends now. From now on you will be soldiers in the war against the symbol of evil, also known as All for 1 Inch," I said. The mere mention of the name sent shivers down the spines of those who heard it. "Who is he? And why haven't we heard about him?" asked Shoto. He was leaning forward, curious about this facet of history that he had never heard about. All for One story is one that has long since transcended into legend. The most accurate version of events we have today goes like this. Sometime at the beginning of quirks themselves there was a man with the power to take the quirks of others and use them for himself as well as bestow them upon whomever he saw fit. Using this power he carved himself a place in the underworld using the chaos of the era and his ability to redistribute quirks to ensure the absolute loyalty of his followers. Somewhere along the line he either discovered a quirk or a set of quirks that grant him immortality. He has reigned since then as the Emperor of Evil. All Might is the first hero to stand against him and win, or should I be more accurate, he was the first hero to survive. I paused for a bit after the USJ attack. I confirmed that All for One lives on as the puppet master behind Tomura Shigaraki and the League of Villains. When the time comes, and make no mistake that it will, I will be the one to lead the charge against All for 1 Inch. The little clearing was silent. Of course, I didn't tell them the full story. One for All is still secret knowledge, kept ever from the Hero Commission, but they now knew enough to make an informed decision. With All for One on the move I had to ensure the future of Hero Society if All Might and I fell in battle. This will be a test of the heart and mind to these kids. The ability and will to stand against such immeasurable power for the sake of protecting those behind your back is essential in the times to come. Silently, I stood up and headed for the shared teacher's room where I would sleep. As I passed through the lounge I was met with a still awake Aizawa working on something on his computer. "What are you doing up?" I asked. "Couldn't sleep, might as well do something productive with my time." He lifted his eyes and narrowed them at me. "You told them, didn't you?" I nodded and sat down in the armchair next to him as he mumbled to himself about problem children. "It was necessary," I said. "They're still kids. They shouldn't have to deal with this," said Aizawa. "You're right, they shouldn't. But then again, they shouldn't have to go through such intensive training just so that they could take that stupid license exam and have a way to legally protect themselves against villains. You're turning them into child soldiers, Aizawa. At least I have the decency to not beat around the bush when it comes down to it. They deserve to know what they're up against. At the very least, it isn't too late for them to withdraw from the hero course and find a safer path in life, but we will know that those that remain are mentally prepared for what we're about to do to them," I said. Aizawa held my gaze for a while before breaking away to stare out the window. I took this as a dismissal and went to bed. It was a quiet early morning. The sun had just begun to show itself and the forest was silent with the exception of the tired moans of an unfortunate group of high schoolers. Suddenly the peace and quiet was interrupted by a giant explosion that rocked the forest. "The hell?" asked Kirishima. Another explosion rocked the forest as a streak of green light flashed over the top of a nearby hill. This was immediately followed by a skyward-bound stream of lightning. Seeing this, the students began muttering to themselves as they watched on in awe. Aizawa sighed as he saw the spectacle put up by his two most problematic problem children. "Keep moving. We're close to the training area," said Aizawa. "Wait, we're going to the same place as those two?" asked a kid from Class B looking somewhat nervous. No, this in a different place that I had Madara create. We get that, and they get the rest of the forest, said Aizawa. This seemed to calm the nerves of Class B. Well, mostly, but that situation was easily rectified. Meanwhile, Katsuki was seething. Yet again it was shoved right in his face, the fact that he was inferior to Izuku and Madara. Small sparks danced on his palms as his rage threatened to consume him yet again, but he pushed that feeling down. This was neither the time nor the place to get angry. He could do that later after he learned all he needed to from the teachers here. // I watched in silent fascination as a swirling bright blue ball of chakra came into existence above Izuku's outstretched hand. I honestly couldn't have imagined that he would be able to form a full Rinnegan within a mere day since I began teaching it to him. It really makes me wonder as to the depths of his chakra control. Hey, Izuku, I called out. Yeah, he responded. Have you done any other chakra control exercises other than what I showed you? I asked. He turned his head to me and blinked, seemingly confused at the question. Of course I did. I've been trying to upgrade my chakra enhancement technique beyond just take chakra and add one for all. I've read your research notes and I had been trying to get better at summoning wind chakra, but I hadn't made much progress, said Izuku. This surprised me. I had no idea that he was that far advanced in his chakra control exercises to begin attempting nature transformation. Still, that leaves one question. Why wind? I asked. Huh? Why did you choose wind style as your first nature transformation to train? Your natural affinity is for lightning, which means that wind and earth will be the hardest elements for you to master. Wouldn't it have been better, to begin with, fire, water, or even lightning? I asked. Izuku grimaced, clearly understanding my point. I didn't want Todoroki to feel bad if I used fire. Water leads to a lot of collateral damage, especially in cities, and I didn't even think about lightning, he said. I nodded in understanding. Okay then. So should we be lightning nature transformation training? I asked. Yes, please, shouted Izuku as he let the Rinnegan dissipate. I won't focus too much on already acquired skills and techniques. Izuku is smart enough to know that he has to keep up training and improving. He's still a long ways away from the level of power he needs to be at. // As I continued working with Izuku, our shadow clones were working on refining hand seals and several of our Fuinjutsu theories. You see, the problem with the hand seals that I invented is that they're mostly gibberish. So far I have well over 40 hand seals and hand seals combinations, and while it works fine for me, it relies too much on having near-perfect control over the nature transformation that the jutsu falls under. It's impractical for anyone wanting to learn my jutsu and not just create their own. This first came to my attention when Izuku tried my hand seals and ended up with a completely different effect than what I could produce. To solve this issue, we are working on recreating the Narutoverse 12 hand seals. Not that Izuku knew that this was precisely what we were doing. I may have lived with him for the entirety of this life, but I still don't feel comfortable telling him that I am a reincarnation or that I have intimate knowledge of the deeper aspect of chakra. Now, back to the problem of hand seals. The trick is finding the right ones and in the right combination. Several more iconic hand seals, like the Shadow Clone hand seal, work in the usual plug-and-play fashion because I lifted it directly from the Narutoverse. This being said, after 15 years with nothing to help me recall or stimulate my memories of the Narutoverse, that knowledge is starting to degrade. Little things like how this and that hand seal was formed were among the first to be forgotten. Still, our work is progressing nicely, even if it is tiresome. We managed to recreate 2 hand seals, and Izuku was beginning to create his own hand seal gibberish. It wasn't much, but he could now use a few jutsu without having to rely on his scientific ninja tool, or as he liked to call it, his jutsu launcher. Speaking of seals, apparently, Izuku is trying very hard to follow in the footsteps of Minato Namikaze. His theories on the relationship between chakra and the surrounding space-time continuum are brilliant, and it won't take him long to figure out how to manipulate the fabric of space-time to his will. If he succeeds, the Flying Thunder God will be an invaluable tool in our arsenal against All for One and his minions. As far as I know, the hero side does not possess any kind of teleportation quirk, making it difficult for the heaviest-hitting pro-heroes to move around swiftly and respond to threats that are not in their immediate vicinity. This leads to many openings that villains could take. After all, they would think twice about committing crimes if they knew that the likes of All Might and I could be summoned at literally a moment's notice to take them out. Even with all this progress, I can't help but worry. Izuku is far from ready. He still thinks too much, and while he is an excellent combatant, he can also be classified as a one-trick pony. This is because most of his chakra must go towards tempering one for all when in use, leaving him with a tiny amount to use for only the most basic of jutsu, such as the replacement, body flicker, or flash step. The Rinnegan may be too much of a drain on his resources if he still wishes to use one for all in combat to its fullest potential. Still, the sheer power boost that one for all gives its user may just be worth foregoing the use of any other chakra-based ability. As he was working on his jutsu and hand seals, I too was training. My reserves may be huge, but that means close to nothing if I can't put them to good use. Seeing as we're far away from any kind of civilization, I thought that it was time to try and recreate Kirin. Long story short, it will take me some time to get it right, even if I can currently summon lightning from the sky. It's simply not powerful enough. This is what I would classify as an ultimate move, for it is destruction incarnate. // On our 4th day in the forest, Aizawa finally decided to let the kids have a bit of fun. The pussycats had organized a test of courage which I found frankly laughable. Still, I didn't put up any kind of resistance to this idea. These were, after all, kids that we were training, and I didn't want them to think that it was all work and no play from here on out in spite of what I had preached on that first night around the fire. From what I'd seen, that speech was sufficient to light a fire under their butts and make them train harder. I didn't need 40 exhausted kids, especially since my thoughts trailed off as my senses picked up a pulse of chakra from the direction of the forest. Immediately, I dialed up my sensory range and I nearly recoiled in surprise as I sensed 5 new chakra signatures just now entering the boundary I set up. They were closely followed by a 6th with an oddly familiar signature. My eyes widened as I deciphered what it was. A Nomu. Everyone, back to the lodge now. I yelled. What? No way, we were just about to begin our run, complained Uraraka and Azui. Mandalay, order everyone back. We've been found and villains have breached the perimeter, I said. This seemed to wake everyone up as Mandalay obeyed the order. In that exact moment, Pixie Bob was flung towards the bushes outlining the clearing we were in and was instantly knocked out by a villain. I turned to them Sharingan blazing and was greeted by a total lack of chakra in either of their bodies. I stepped forward as I began to exert my presence on the area around me. Who are you? I demanded. We. Oh, we're the League of Villains Action Squad and we're here to cause some chaos. My name is Magna and this here with me is Spinner, said the transgender person named Magna. This name feels familiar, maybe there is something about it in the hero database. So, you are the mighty Rikudou, huh? I'm not interested in you, but in your brother, the one Stain deemed worthy, said the lizard, Spinner. I narrowed my eyes as my Sharingan glowed and spun a bit. This action made the 2 villains take a step back and look away from me. It was all the opening I needed as I flash-stepped close to Magna and shoved a Chidori through her chest. Spinner gasped in surprise at my action and I watched as the Magna that I stabbed through the heart slowly turned to mud. I see. These are clones, the result of someone's quirk. Your leader was wise to send clones against me, but ultimately he overestimated your abilities. Now surrender and bow down like the dogs that you are, I said. Why, you? I am Spinner, the follower of Stain who will make his dreams a reality. I will not bow to the likes of you. He didn't finish his sentence as Izuku came in and took off his head with a well-placed lariat. Nissan, we've got a problem, said Izuku. I am aware, I replied as I studied him. He must have come barreling at full tilt towards me as soon as he sensed the chakra pulse from the boundary I set up on the first day. Evidently, he was either meditating or asleep, seeing as he was barefooted and had only a pair of sweatpants on. In the background I could see some girls leering at him. I mentally snorted. It seems that my little brother will have quite the fangirl following if he continues to forget his clothes. Rikudou, we must gather the other students in the forest. They're sitting ducks over there, said Mandalay. Understood. Send a message to them and order them to take the shortest route back to the clearing. Tell them that they are permitted to use their quirks in any way they see fit to help them get back as soon as possible, I ordered. With a simple hand seal, there were now 3 of me. The clones instantly headed off into the forest. If villains like Magna and Spinner were all there were here, even clones should be fine. Wait. What about Koda? Asked Izuku. Who? I couldn't help but ask. My nephew, said Mandalay, who was now a curious cross between irritated and worried. I ignored her and returned to Izuku. Can you find him? I asked. He nodded back. I twitched my head to the side and he vanished in a body flicker towards the area that he knew the boy to be in. I too took off into the forest. The main priority of my clones was to evacuate the kids from the line of fire. My main priority was to find and kill the one creating the clones. Such a force multiplier should never be allowed to fall into the hands of villains, and if the hero side can't have it, I'll make sure that no one will. // Izuku managed to reach Kota just in time to save him from being reduced to a red paste by the villain in front of him. Kota, are you okay? Asked Izuku. He's trembling, noticed Izuku. Oi, what's this? Are you interrupting my fun? At least have the decency to wait patiently for your time to die, called out the villain. Turning to face him, Izuku was left speechless as he finally recognized the villain. You're Muscular, growled out Izuku. Muscular cocked his head to the side and grinned. Ho, you recognize me. What are you doing here? Have you come to finish the job you started with the water hose duo? Asked Izuku again. Finish what I started. Wait, don't tell me that little kid over there is their son. Man, what a day. I mean, I didn't originally plan to kill him, but I guess I'm going to now, roared Muscular as he charged towards Izuku. Acting on instinct, Izuku shoved his arm forward and green Fuinjutsu lines spread out to form the seal for Roia's. Muscular's fist smashed down on the shield with 7 layers. The first 2 layers were instantly shattered. Izuku grit his teeth as he felt Roia's fail him. Grabbing Kota, he replaced himself with a bit of ruble just as Roia's failed completely and Muscular's fist smashed the ground where they were standing to pieces. You're a fast one, aren't you? Makes sense that Shigaraki wants you dead, said Muscular. This made Izuku snap to attention. What are your goals? Asked Izuku as he charged one for all in his body. My goals? I just want to rampage. Oh, right before I kill you, can you tell me where to find a kid named Bakugo? Katsuki? What do you want with him? Asked Izuku. Fuck if I know. Now, enough talk, let's do this, said Muscular as he kicked off at Izuku. Izuku met him midway as he tried to trade blows with the muscled maniac in front of him. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough and he was blown back. Shit. He took my 20% like it was nothing. What a stupid powerful quirk. Is that it? I admit, you're fast kid, but you lack strength, yelled Muscular as he went on the offensive yet again. Izuku instantly flash-stepped away, picking Kota on the way and body flickering out of there. I'm not enough. Damn it. I thought that I'd gotten stronger, but that guy is too strong for me right now and I can't use my jutsu without worrying about what Kota will do. I doubt that he will listen to me if I tell him to stay put, thought Izuku. A roar was heard through the forest, coming from the mountain where Izuku had left Muscular, making Izuku stop behind a tree. Hey Kota, I need to get back there. Can I trust you to hide here? Asked Izuku. No, you don't have to, let's just run, whimpered out Kota. Izuku felt Kota cling harder to him, unwilling to let him go. I have to go, Kota. I have to stop Muscular. Why? Why do you have to? Let's just run, it's not worth it, you can't throw away your life like that. Izuku brought up a hand to the back of Kota's head. He moved his head so that he could look into the child's watering eyes. I have to do this, Kota. There is no other way. Why you? And isn't that the million-dollar question, thought Izuku bitterly. He originally wanted to be a hero because they were cool. They saved people, and while he might have this innate desire and instinct, Izuku couldn't help but feel sick at the sheer amount of politicking that any pro hero had to do. Still, he couldn't back down. He didn't want to back down, even if he didn't have one for all, even if he was quirkless, he just couldn't sit back while others suffered. Because someone has to do it, so why not me? Kota, people like Muscular, evil people, they're all the same no matter what they might say, no matter what justification they may have, all they want is to see the world burn. People like your parents, like me and my brother, we stop them, said Izuku. But you'll die. All heroes die. That's all they're good at, cried Kota. I won't die, replied Izuku with a smile. I'll win, you'll see. Izuku set Kota down in between the roots of the tree. Stay here, okay. Kota nodded. Returning to his full height, Izuku stretched and took off. It was time to face Muscular. // I ran at full tilt into the forest. Through the link with my clones, I could sense that they were approaching the first sites where students were supposed to be. Thankfully most of Class A was spared and they were now either at the lodge or near enough to it that their combined power will deter any villain assault. This was, of course, if the clone quirk had some limitations. I don't like that assumption. Ideally, I would see this as some sort of shadow clone copy. When I struck the villain in the chest with Chidori, I felt less resistance than when I do it to a normal flesh and blood person. Going by this, it's safe to assume that the clones are physically weaker than their real counterparts. Now, as to any limitations concerning the numbers it could produce. I'll assume it has none. And that's scary. I slowed down as I reached the front of the poison gas cloud. Folding a few head seals, I took a deep breath. Wind style, breath of the wind god. From my hands and mouth, a massive stream of air shot forth, blowing away the gas cloud. I resumed running, and when I reached the middle of the cloud, I found 2 students and an unconscious villain. Kendo, testu, are you alright? Rikudou. Yeah, we're fine, began Kendo, but I cut her off. Now's not the time. Head back to camp. Assist any students you may see, but do not waste time. Get to the camp as soon as possible. I ordered. Understood, they replied and ran off. I approached the knocked out villain and reached in my pocket for a restraining seal. It is a fairly new design, made to restrain both the quirk and the body of downed opponents. It was without a doubt one of Izuku's finer works. I slapped the seal on the kid's chest. God, he was even wearing a middle school uniform and he felt scrawny under his clothes. He can't be older than 15, 16 at most, and now he'll get to spend the rest of his prime years in jail if he gets out at all. I pulsed my chakra. Fuinjutsu, Heaven and Earth Temple 5-point seal. I twisted my hand and blood-red Fuinjutsu lines spread across his body, jerking his arms backwards and locking them together near his lower back. His legs were locked together as well. Once that was done, the lines disappeared, though I know that on his chest the chakra will have branded the Heavenly Temple 5-point seal into his skin, thus making him unable to use his quirk until it was released, and even then, those scars will remain with lingering traces of my chakra for years to come, making the remote reactivation of the seal a possibility. I stood back up and looked towards the section of the forest currently on fire. That will be my next stop. // Muscular was pissed, Izuku noted as he watched from the treetops as Muscular punched tree after tree in an attempt to find Izuku and Koda. If Izuku wanted to win this, he'll have to be smarter, not stronger. One for All has proven that it cannot stand alone against Muscular at this level. Izuku had to get creative with his chakra. Unfortunately, all he had on was a pair of pants and some underwear, and carving a seal with chakra into the ground would give away his position due to the light show that usually came with constructing a seal out of pure chakra. In the end, there really was only one solution. Fire style, Great Fireball, yelled out Izuku as he blew out a ball of fire the size of a small car. Muscular noticed this and dogged the projectile, making quick work of the distance between them and grabbing Izuku by the throat. Nice attack, kid. Hasn't anyone told you that shouting gives away your position, said Muscular. Izuku grinned as he gripped the hand that Muscular had around his throat. Lightning style, Lightning Palm. Muscular screamed as the current passed through his body, immobilizing him. Fire style, Great Fireball, came a voice from behind. Being paralyzed by the electricity flowing through him, Muscular couldn't dodge the second fireball, and thusly he was hit with the full force of the jutsu. Unfortunately, the heat was too much for the clone in Muscular's hand and it popped. This allowed Muscular to regain some semblance of control over his body as he pushed his quirk for all it was worth to take the brunt of the damage. When the fire subsided, all that was left in its wake was a truly angry Muscular. You, he hissed. Izuku wisely decided to flee as Muscular came roaring after him, cursing and promising to tear him apart limb from limb. Man, this guy can talk. Now, just a little more, thought Izuku. While he was busy roasting Muscular, another one of his clones had prepared a trap for him and Izuku was the bait that was leading Muscular right to it. Not yet, now. Fuinjutsu, Chains of Heaven. From the ground, 5 golden chains sprouted as the seal lit green under Muscular. 4 of the 5 chains each pierced one of Muscular's limbs, rendering him immobile, while the last was attempting to wrestle him to the ground with little success. Taking a leap, Izuku charged a Rinnegan in his hand and brought down the volatile ball of chakra straight onto Muscular's damaged back. The man screamed as the Rinnegan shredded flesh and bone, severing his spine and detonating in his belly, making it explode and spread his guts across the forest floor. Izuku could do nothing but watch in horror at what he had done. Looking down, he saw his hand shaking and stained red until halfway to his elbow. Unable to hold it anymore, he sunk to his knees and vomited, his whole body shaking as he struggled to get to grips with what he had just done. What would All Might think of him? What would his mother and his friends and teachers? I have to find Nai-san. He'll know what to do. With shaky legs, Izuku stood up as he left in search of Koda. He had to get him back to the camp and find his brother. That single line of thought was what was holding him together. He could do this, just like his brother had taught him. As for the rest, he'll figure it out later. Unbeknownst to anyone, for a brief moment, Izuku's eyes flashed red. // As I arrived at the location of the fire, I couldn't sense anyone in the immediate vicinity. Now it was all but confirmed. This group of villains truly was working with the League and had access to Kurogiri. They weren't some copycat group hoping to make a quick buck from the League's reputation. Folding several hand seals, I brought my hands to my mouth and let loose the technique. Water style, waterfall. The deluge of water that came from me was enough to nearly drown the entire area as it swept away the burning trees, extinguishing them and bringing untold devastation to the forest. I vanished once again in a body flicker as I headed to the location where one of my two clones was popped. Katsuki and Todoroki were fighting against a villain. If I remember correctly, Moonfish was a cannibal sentenced to death. That was not an easy enemy to deal with. As soon as I arrived, I let loose a stream of Sith lightning from my fingertips. Yes, I know how that sounds, but I don't care. That jutsu looks exactly like Palpatine's Sith lightning, and I shall call it as such. Moonfish went down in mere seconds. Is anyone hurt? I asked. We are fine. Thank you for your assistance, said Todoroki. TCH, we had it handled, grumbled Katsuki. I let a small smirk appear on my face. Honestly, if it wasn't for his abrasive personality and stupid inferiority complex, we could have been best friends and maybe Izuku wouldn't have been so lonely growing up with only me around. Of course you did. Is there anyone left on the course? None that we could find. We don't know where Ragdoll is, though, said Todoroki. She'll be fine. She's a trained pro hero, I dismissed his thoughts. Just then, from the front Izuku appeared with a dark shadow, possessed Tokoyami and Shogi. Izuku and Shoji appeared to be guiding Dark Shadow towards Katsuki and Todoroki. Those two reacted instantly, creating enough light to help get Dark Shadow under control. Are you all right? I asked. As I looked them over, my eyes stilled over Izuku. His right hand was covered in dried blood and he was trembling. His eyes were wide and his pupils dilated. He was clearly running on adrenaline alone. Nisanai, he began. Save it. I ordered in a clipped tone that made everyone straightened. We'll deal with it later. Now we have to get back to camp. Izuku nodded stiffly as he changed his focus. I can't let him crash yet, not while we're deep in enemy territory and vulnerable to attacks from all sides. Besides, I can guess what this talk will be about and it's not one that I will relish having with him. We positioned ourselves in a defensive formation with me at the back and Izuku taking point. Katsuki grumbled a bit, but he relented to being the left flank guard. Suddenly a familiar pulse of chakra appeared on my senses as two warp gates opened both in front and behind us. Defensive positions. I yelled. They were quick to do so. I shared a look with Izuku. Without waiting another moment, we both burst into motion. I had arguably the harder task as my gate spat out a Nomu alongside a villain with burns on his face. With my lightning chakra armor, I instantly closed the distance and beheaded the Nomu with a lariat. Izuku, much the same, was busy breaking the horde of clones that were coming from his still open portal. I dodged a blast of fire and sent out a water jet that cut through the clone of the fire user that most likely started the forest fire. Kakin, screamed Izuku. My head snapped up to reveal a villain in a yellow trench coat, top hat and mask holding a cane and a small blue ball. From the chakra emanating from that ball, I could guess who was in it. He waved at us as he stepped back through a portal. "NOO," yelled Izuku. Suddenly black whip-like strands erupted from his hand and began trashing the surroundings. It lasted for only a moment as Izuku pushed one for all down and under, forcefully deactivating the quirk and holding it at bay with his own chakra. I looked on at the spot where the masked villain disappeared as Izuku screamed in what I could only assume to be a mix of rage and pain. I balled my fist as I took stock of the student still with me. I felt a sick thankfulness that only Katsuki was taken. I shook my head to remove those thoughts. I can't falter now. Others still need me. If you want to support me, check out my Patreon at https://www.patreon.com/Kaioshin. I tend to polls that decide important plot stuff in my P at Trian. Many thanks to my awesome patrons. Ben Phillips.
If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.